Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the ACT's Festival of Treasury Transformation. We've got a great day ahead and a great session to come today. The session you're looking at, and if this isn't the right one, then apologies for that, is Shared Service Centres, is the future virtual? Got a fantastic panel who I'll introduce in a bit, but first there's a bit of housekeeping to go. One of the joys of it being a virtual event is I don't have to warn you about fire alarms and exits as well, so you should know those yourself at the moment, so that's something not to worry about as well. One of the things I'd like to encourage is we have a question function available, so if you have any questions, comments to make about what we're saying today, then please just type those in. I can see those straight away, so I can introduce those into the discussion. This session is being recorded, so if you have to go away at part of it, but you're still interested, you can definitely pick this up afterwards, as with almost all of the Festival of Treasury Transformation. And also on top of that, there's a discussion forum as well. One of the things we'd really encourage you to do is, if you can get involved with us, the ACT's social media pages, both in LinkedIn, we have a LinkedIn group, but also with Twitter as well. So our Twitter handle is @ACTUpdate, and the hashtag is ACTFTT. So before I get and introduce the panel, one other thing just to let you know about, we've got a distinguished guest later on this afternoon, which I'd really encourage everyone to come along and listen to, and that's the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby. So that's a great session to follow us, so no pressure for the panel at all. Shared Service Centres is the future virtual. Just a bit of an introduction to that. We've been at the ACT working within Treasury operations teams within Shared Service Centres probably about since 2014, 2015. But in 2017, we actually ran some research to find out how many Treasury operations were there within Shared Service Centres. And we found that there is a lot. It's over 75%, nearly 80% of people who responded to the survey have a Treasury operation within a shared service centre. So we've continued to work on that, but one of the things that we actually found was that it wasn't just shared service centres. One of the other areas was global business centres or global centres of excellence as well. So we're going to be looking at all of those different things and discussing some of the points on that. A loose distinction between the two is a shared service centre is generally local or regional. Most organisations that we surveyed had more than one, nearly 70% had more than one shared service centre. But the global business centres, as the name suggests, is much more of a global operation, and we'll look more about the distinctions between the two as we go through. We're only going to be discussing Treasury operations within those functions, and not the wider ramifications of that, because I'm sure there's a lot going on that. Once I've asked the panel to introduce themselves and talk about their own organisation, we'll be talking very much more about the general view of where the direction of travel for these operations, rather than specifics on that. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce the panel. We've got Mike Foye, who's Treasury Operations Global for Mondelez. We've got Iulia Macarascu, who's head of Global Treasury Operations at British American Tobacco, and David Munday, who's UK Group Treasurer at Innogy. And I wondered, first of all, if I could just ask everyone just to introduce themselves, and also just to talk about how they've been engaged with shared service centres and global business centres as well. So Mike, if I could go to you first.
Sure. Okay. Hi everybody. Hi. So I'm Treasury Operations Director at Mondelez. For those of you who don't know Mondelez, very briefly, it's one of the largest snacking companies in the world. We sell in 150 markets, and our key brands are Oreo, Belvita, Cadbury, Milka, Toblerone, and Trident Gum. So a fair old package there. I've been in Treasury for 30 years, and last 10 of those has been spent with Mondelez. And in that time, we actually made the transformation from being very regionally focused into a global centre of excellence. We call it GBS, as you might well know it. We have a global function now. There's 77 of us across 20 different countries, but with our largest concentration of people in our Bratislava team in Slovakia. And they are looking after the global aspects of treasury, so globalization of bank accounts management, guarantees. Most of the liquidity management that we do across the world is centered from there. And so we've had a bit of a transformation all since sort of 2014, all the way through to 2020, to get ourselves to this kind of global positioning.
And Diana, if you could...
Sure. Hello, everyone. Nice to have you with us. My name is Iulia Macarascu. As David already said, I am head of global treasury operations, working for BAT, British American Tobacco, and probably I should not detail too much on what is the main product that we are engaging with. I have been with BAT for close to 8 years, and I've joined BAT when actually we were at the crossroad of globalizing treasury into the shared service. Well, at that point in time, it was the shared service. Now BAT has moved along, and we have formed global business services as a build-up on the shared services platform. Now, that was an interesting journey because I have managed to help out craft BAT's Center of Excellence for Treasury into the GBS. And while I'm not part of the GBS because I'm reporting directly into the Group Treasury to the core Treasury Center that we have in UK, I am based in Romania in a global business service. Then I'm very close to the activity itself.
Thanks very much, Diana. And David.
Yeah, hello all. David Munday, UK Group Treasurer for Innogy, which is a German utility company just going through a merger with E.ON. In the UK, we're both npower and E.ON brands of utility. So my interaction has been over the last, similar to Mike actually, over the last couple of years. Initially, we had a very small shared service centre set up for just the UK parts of the business in our office in Worcester. But then ultimately, the view was from the group that we'd set up a new shared service centre of expertise in Krakow. And as part of that, pretty much the office that we set up, or the service that we set up in our office in Worcester, was used as a blueprint. And some of those sort of best practice, etc., were taken on board. And they were the first parts that were taken over to set up in Krakow. And since then, a lot of other areas have been onboarded into Krakow as well. And my interaction with them is on a daily basis from a sort of treasury perspective, on the payment side, general activity, APAR, etc. So quite a close relationship with them, and a very good relationship with them.
Thanks very much, David. Before we go into the more of the general discussion, I think it would be quite useful to look at the elephant in the room, which is COVID-19. I just wonder how your operations, if at all, have changed since the start of the pandemic, and what things have you had to put in place because of that? And if I could go to Diana first.
Sure. Yes, indeed, it was a challenge, and a challenge in more than one place. Of course, the business in itself has its own challenges because of COVID-19. Now you know, or probably most of you know, that BAT operates in a wider environment, and we have a presence in so many countries and so many locations in which actually COVID-19 has struck. And because of that, almost the entire population of BAT was in lockdown. So we needed to develop quickly some new ways of working. We needed to develop quickly to build actually some bridges in between various functions. We had an IT platform, of course, but that doesn't mean that the change came easily. Now, if I'm talking specifically about my team, the challenge that I have seen, and because if someone would have asked me probably January, February, or even last year, if my entire team can actually work from home, my entire team means 40 plus people, I would have said no, no way, because we are working closely together. We are dependent on each other. Within my function, I have 6 different sub-departments. And it is easier to just call across the room and see the other one's perspective. Now, of course, lockdown happened in Romania as well, and since March we were forced to all forced to go home. To my surprise, and it was really a pleasant surprise, we did not drop anything. We continue to deliver with the same efficiency, and we interacted in the same way. The hard part came for us where we needed to hire new team members. And this is where we struggled, and we still struggle, because first and foremost, you need to have your interviews, to keep your interviews, to choose the best candidate possible. And afterwards, you need to train them. I would say, again, looking specifically to my team, but I have discussed with my colleagues from GPS and they share the same aspect. Also, there is a matter of the maturity of the team. If you are in a higher role where strategic thinking is more applied, then probably sometimes it is easier, because you are talking to a mature person who knows very well what she does. But if you are talking to a junior and you need them to do something operational, this takes time. And building up in the past for us, probably it was maybe 2 to 3 months to develop person to the right capability. Now probably it's close to 4, maybe 5, depending again of the maturity of the person. Probably with some processes it's easier, with some processes it's a bit harder, but that was my experience.
Thanks, Diana. That's really useful. And David, how's it been for your operation?
It's been quite good. I think luckily the staff within the shared service centre always had the ability for flexible working, agile working. And I think luckily the IT that they provided with on day one enabled them when they had lockdown. Again, similar to Diana, no one went into the offices, and the offices are still closed at the moment. So those individuals within the various teams are having the ability to work from home. And luckily the IT has been such that they can work from home and provide the similar level of service, and not better service in some respects, in terms of, because they know they have to go over and above in the situation they're in. And I think that's been quite well received by everyone across the group. I think the expectation is at some point they will return back to the office. But ultimately, things like, luckily we have the technology platform, we've got the things like Zoom, Teams, etc., where people have been able to speak together. And again, similar, where you have these shared service centres overseas, language isn't a barrier anymore, so people can get on the calls, they can make the calls very easy. This is not all has to be done via emails anymore. People are very willing to pick up the phone and talk to people because that's what they're used to. So that's been able them to deliver the same level of service as has been doing over the last prior to COVID.
That's useful. That's interesting, David, because I think some of that will lead into our subsequent discussions. And Mike, for you?
Yeah, very similar. I mean, I think the impact for us on COVID, happily wasn't as drastic as you might imagine it to be. I think in terms of the work practices, the way we went about things at a kind of global level, there was more interaction with all of our peer functions in and around liquidity, looking after customers, supply chain, all those things. And then how do we infrastructurally support that from our shared service centres? How are we branching out? We did, if you like, have a very fortunate but misfortune a few years ago. We kind of had this scenario for ourselves already, because we were hit by a massive cyber attack in 2017. So that meant to say that there was already a kind of outside of the office environment working infrastructure pretty much in place. It wasn't regularly tapped. It wasn't something we do every day, but it was something that was there, but was a backdrop for us. So in terms of moving out from the office and then being remote working as a collective, it wasn't something that was very new to us. It was something we'd tried and tested before. So we're quite happy of how we were going into that. We did do some sort of preemptive steps, and we identified some of the key people that would need to keep the payment processes and other things alive. So they were locked down, if you like. They were remote working before any lockdowns happened to the office. And then rather similar kind of technological experiences that the other two panel members have had too. you know, getting people together. I mean, we meet kind of virtually anyway, so this was kind of like a next step on from it. Was there more involvement, more sharing? I think there probably was. One thing I did find actually, and you know, observationally, was that a lot of people working kind of longer through the days as well. You could, you obviously know who's online and who's doing what, and then you're finding things going into the evenings. And I think people were fitting a kind of work pattern into a longer day and taking necessary breaks and other things and trying to, you know, draw away from monitors. I think that the way people did that was, you know, really quite good, really quite refreshing. Yeah. But you know, some of the things like Skype and things like that, you know, didn't quite work so well as I think what we're hearing from things like Microsoft Teams and from Zoom as well. But by and large, you know, we've had quite a strong footing, and we've worked very well, coped very well with the interactions we've had in that time.
Thanks, Mike. That's really useful. As the membership organisation for Corporate Treasury, you'll all be encouraged to hear that we've done quite a lot of emergency planning as well around that. And, you know, thanks to our IT person, remote working has worked really well for the ACT as well. So, right, I think this leads us on to the first discussion point. And just to remind everyone who's listening, this is much more a general conversation about these areas rather than the specifics of the organizations involved at the moment. I think we've all talked about the technology and things around Zoom and Skype and Microsoft Teams, but I wonder whether the current situation is likely to accelerate the use of technology, specific Treasury focused technology within shared service centers and global business centers. And what I'm looking at that is robotic process automation, AI and MI as well, and whether they're likely, this is like to stop this process, accelerate this process. When we did the actual questionnaire, over 20% of the shared service centers were expecting a reduction in their team size due to robotic process automation. And I just wondered what your views were on that. And I wondered, David, if you could start with your views on that.
Yeah, thanks. We have started looking at using use of robots, etc., but it's probably more on the sort of standard month-end processes that it's been used for, things like intercompany invoicing, interest charges, etc. And I think that will continue throughout this now. I think, you know, people have seen that and actually will use that and grow the process. Will it reduce headcount? You could say there's a possibility there, but I think also what it might do is actually just free up people's time to add the more added value side of it. And I think that's the expectation ultimately, is that they will just use the extra time and either use it, continue putting more robots in, or actually use it just for added value activity. But I think ultimately we've seen benefits there. I think initially it was a bit of sort of teething issues as you can go through the testing process, etc., and a bit of time spent, but ultimately, yeah, added value all round really.
Thanks, David. And Mike, and again, this is much more kind of a view of the overall picture rather than your specifics on that. I don't want to draw you on exactly what you're doing in that area.
Yeah, no, okay. So let's switch to hypothetical mode, shall we then?
Yeah.
No, actually, I think, you know, from our point of view, we've wanted to really kickstart into robotics and machine learning, AI, all of those good things. And, you know, I think it does have a very, very, you know, valid place within Treasury. That this may be a kind of catalyst, this COVID environment that may draw us into doing this a bit more quickly, and the organisation may react in a similar sort of way, based upon the challenges we may have had, you know, through the process. You know, we've got quite a number of different things that we can see an advantage in just basic robotics, just processes, the sort of repetitive nature of stuff that we can do every day. And I think the thing that we've had difficulty, hypothetically, doing is is finding ways in which people can look at, you know, how much work you have to do to roboticize something against the small piece that you're probably doing. But in terms of growing that knowledge and having like a digital champion in there to do it, people who can look at the processes, understand the processes, and build those into robotic ways of then rolling out more and more iterations of a robotic solution. And I think you can probably find that there will be a lot more uptake from it. And that's where we'd really like to get to. We would want to do that organizationally in tune with our IBS colleagues, our IT colleagues, as most others would have them. And that's a kind of area we need to work on, I think, where, you've got to find the ownership for where all these processes are going to be. If you start running lots of robotic processes in the treasury environment running around the systems, then who's cataloging these, who's logging them, what are they doing, where's the regression testing on those things. So we'd certainly want to move out in that direction. And I think this will be a kind of kick up and a start up for us. The other thing, thinking about it as well, is that maybe it makes us look at ways in which there's an interaction with our business partners and how we could get them to more self-serve than we do at the moment. So this is not an actual example, but it's a kind of typifier. It's a request from the business, we'd like a guarantee. Then we would respond, well, what kind of guarantee would you like? And then it's, well, what have you got? So we'd want to try and get something which is more of a kind of bot-based element that helps us, cut through all that periphery, first of all, and then, as to David's point, is to get the efficiency plays in place and serve the business a little bit more. And we're looking at that in terms of, would that be, targeted for FTE reductions? Probably almost certainly not. Really would see this as an efficiency play, and then basing it and giving people more free time to get to the core treasury knowledge, to develop themselves, and to put these processes to bed until such a time as maybe they fall over. Somebody's got to pick them up. But primarily it's a person thing. It's shifting the responsibilities away and getting them time and time to develop.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Mike. And Diana, I've seen a really exciting presentations of yours before, so I know you have some thoughts on this area. So I wonder if you could let us know.
Yes, I do agree. Actually, I do agree with what Mike and David have said. Also, as well in BAT, we have started looking at the implementation robots or using AI for. I would say maybe 1 year. 1 year ago we started, and we had a consolidated approach. So we have looked throughout all the processes that we have in BAT, but to the core ones that are driven by GBS. And to that point, I also include here the treasury as an end-to-end process, what we can do to increase the efficiency. And we have identified pockets where either robots or IPA can be built and utilized. As you have said, we have already used an AI into a project that we deployed. So it is not a matter of using it only into the business as usual activity that is running day to day, but also into the projects that we develop. Why? Of course, because of time. Because while for the project it would have taken me 6 persons work, if I recall correctly, 42 days. The bot has done that in less than 3 days. But equally, we have looked at implementing robots into the business as usual activity, and to that point too are ready for deployment within our treasury function. Now, as the guys were saying, we are not looking to decrease the overheads. It's not a matter of decreasing our overhead. It's just a matter of creating space for our teams to focus on developing their skills, being able to bring more value to the business, more analysis, more understanding that we can put forward to the business partner so that we can decide together what is the best approach.
That's really useful, and we're going to touch on the skills agenda a bit later on in the session. Just before I go to the next discussion point, I just wanted to remind the audience that there is a questions function available. So if you have any questions or statements that you'd like to make about that we can discuss, then please just put those down, and we can then discuss those further. So and if you're looking for that and thinking, how do I ask those questions, if you're on the web link, it should just be above the session window. But if you're on the app, the Q&A button is located at the bottom left. So please get asking us questions so we can discuss those areas a bit more. So moving kind of more blue sky thinking around the technology aspect of that is, if we've already looked at lockdown has made everyone move to virtual, away from the office, does this kind of, are we starting to look at, and as the title of the session started, shared service centres and global business centres, specifically treasury operations? Do we need a physical location anymore? And I just wondered whether that's something that, is that something that we still need? If not now, will we still be needing a physical location in, say, 4 or 5 years' time? So, Mike, I wondered if you could opine on that first.
Yeah, I think there's certainly a lot of opportunity to reduce the physical locality, but I think from the way in which our potentially specifically maybe our Bratislava operations are and where they're concentrated elsewhere in the world, I think we need that interaction of people within a physical location, so that the development needs also are more satisfied by people shadow tasking and doing all sorts of other things. Certainly, I think that would be punctuated by an ability to work remotely from quite a period of time. I think in our general shared service center approaches in the organization, that there's an encouragement for working from home, and maybe punctuating the week with a bit more freedom and latitude away. But in fact, if it was hard and fast stapling, everybody's got to be in a physical location, the answer is no, that doesn't have to be the case. But predominantly for the best mix that I think we can achieve for business partner support and other things, then a physical location that's accessible by those groups with potential to move away and work remotely is a way that we would take it going forward.
Okay, thanks for that, Mike. And Diana?
Oh, well, I think that again, as Mike was saying, probably depends on the activity that is required. If we are thinking about the treasury, the core treasury function is an advisory team, if you wish, who should sit closer to the CFO and advise whenever the case might be of the best approach to take to protect our liquidity, to protect our investments, so on and so forth. Maybe again, not in all the cases or in all aspects of treasury, a physical location would be required. Look, we are working for 3 months, everyone from home, so it is working. There might be a question of efficiency. Are we more efficient being close to each other and talking more? Because as the guys were saying, I've seen my team spending so much time. I see them online at 9 or 10 o'clock in the evening. Is it necessary? Is it because we are inefficient? Is it because by choice they want to maybe start later in the day? Those are the questions where having a physical location might be answered much faster. But again, some of the functions within the core treasury probably will need a physical location. If an entire team of 70 people, 60 people, how much we are, not sure. Probably not, but surely some.
Okay, that's really useful. And David, just to
similar, I think. Yeah, similar with Diana and Mike, really. I think there is a requirement to have like the core expert treasury area team in the business, really, just to sort of be close to the senior management to understand what their requirements are and act as that sort of business partnering role, which I think is a key part of the treasury finance community, really, to actually sort of go out into the business and sit down with them and speak to them. So I think the idea of actually being close to them within reason is good. And if where you're not close, the ability to travel to their offices and see what they're doing and actually get a feel for it and sort of smell what's happening in the business itself, and then actually act as that business partnering role and actually see how you can, aid with them and look at their requirements and provide that for them, which is great. And maybe that wouldn't happen on a virtual basis. You wouldn't have that closeness and that relationship which is required. But I think there is that, you can see why, with things like shared service centers and the ability to talk to one another, online calls, etc., aids that. But I think that closeness is still required for sure.
I think as a corollary, as an addendum to that, I struggle with that in the rehearsals and I still can't say it. I think one of the things about that, an interesting question, is if there are a number of the processes within Treasury that can be automated, is there still a need for your own shared service center, global business center to operate those? Or is there more of an opportunity to maybe look at a third-party model on that and see some of the aspects that don't need the close connection and conversation with the rest of the organization? Is there an opportunity to farm that out, or is that still best to keep in-house? Diana, just your thoughts on that?
I know that in BAT we have looked at all the possibilities throughout the years, and since I've joined BAT, we have looked at transforming the team in such a way to be more efficient. When I joined BAT, actually, if you think about it, banking ops, which are processing commercial payments, was part of the treasury function. Evolving through the time, we have realized that the closeness of that team means more if they are joined together with our AP team. Hence, we have transformed a little bit that part of the organization and put it together with the AP function so that they can provide an end-to-end service. I'm sure that there is more out there, and we can carve out some of the activities which can either be automated or move to other teams so that we can actually focus on the core treasury. For us, it was again a matter of giving an answer to our question: what is the most secure and efficient way of working? Because while we want to be efficient, one thing that is foremost into our mind is the control that we have around our processes so that we can operate correctly. We are all of us in treasury, including my colleague around the panel, are working with big numbers. Hence, control is something that we are very keen on keeping. So that would be my question.
Thanks, David. Before I go to you, actually, my prompt on questions has certainly encouraged some people to ask questions. And there was a question that actually linked into what Diana's just said, is about with the move to virtual locations, how has supervision and governance of the team changed since lockdown? What have you had to change on that? What's worked well? So I wondered, you know, if we can go, David, if we can start with you, David, just a brief on that. Have you needed to change much? And maybe not going into specifics, or has everything worked pretty much?
No, I think everything's worked pretty well. I think the only thing that's probably everyone's found out is the hardness to actually sort of hard wet signatures on documents now is very hard to achieve, and therefore I think some of the banks have had to now at long last accept sort of scanned copies as signed versions of documents where you're trying to change things. But obviously internally, we've had a very sort of strict level of sort of internal measures to ensure that, you know, signatures, etc., for documents, for signing stuff, for payments, and the controls that are in place. So that's worked well. So nothing's really changed there at all. I think we're comfortable with what we've got in place, but it's good that the banks have now, within reason, accepted scanned copies of documents, and that has help facilitate, you know, getting stuff done, shall we say, which has been hard in the past. And hopefully they won't revert back to the old school once we come out of lockdown. I think it just aids the ease of flow of documents around the organisation.
Well, hopefully, David, from our mouths to their ears today, so hopefully there's a few bankers listening on that. And Mike, have you got anything to add on the actual, what you've needed to put in place on that?
Well, no, I think, you know, the sort of control framework we had going in was quite good because, like I say, we had an fortunate incident a couple of years ago, which gave us that sort of cyber break. So where, you know, the traditional methodology in and around how we're going to process stuff has to change because of something like this, and we've got controls that are pretty much already ingrained around that. And did we take anything more supervisory? I'd say that we didn't really, but one of the things that we could see from this actually is that you actually have more visibility on what's going on because people are using the chat lines, the chat lines. That's not quite
interesting.
Yeah, we're monitoring that process. But people are using chat boxes and all sorts of other things, the emails. You can see the trail of the important stuff which is going through, and it's going in a sequence. So it's helping us to see how the systemization is moving towards all the settlements and things. But in terms of just narrowing it down to people, other than the normal controls we had, we didn't really, I don't think, have to apply much more.
Thanks, Mike. And Diana, you've already mentioned what you were doing on that, so that's really useful on that. So thank you. A question that's coming, which was very close to something that we were going to discuss anyway, is Treasury and global business centres and shared service centres. Is Treasury, as it becomes more, and I think we've covered quite a bit of this, will Treasury move closer to global business centres, or will there still be that need for the core team to be close to the business? And I know we've answered this to a certain amount, but if there is still that need, does that mean that Treasury within global business centres and shared service centres is going to become more prevalent or less prevalent? David, I don't know whether you've got any thoughts on that.
No, I just think if you were senior management in organisation, CFO, etc., you would want that closeness to your treasury team. So you've got responsibility over them, and ultimately, you literally can walk around the corner and speak to these people about stuff that's happening, especially in a situation we've been recently where there's been sort of calls on cash and cash issues, etc., and the closeness and sort of really reactive on a sort of an hourly basis in terms of what's happening to the organisation. And therefore, that closeness, I think, has worked well only where you can sit actually in close proximity to the senior management team.
Thanks, David. And Mike, anything to add on that at all?
Very similar, because, and I think it brought it out, some of the cohesion that we had in the sort of CFO's team at looking at all the strands, how COVID or other circumstances might be affecting the business. How does Treasury as a kind of central point to this? It's got the visibility on cash and all sorts of other things. It's the barometer, the feed in. In terms of Treasury is very specialised. As we all, I think, know and love, it kind of separates us away from mainstream finance, which we enjoy. That remoteness is great. And could you really sort of morph that into other financial controlling aspects? And maybe you probably could, but you'd be kind of straitjacketing, I think, the level of thinking and strategy you could get from that. So I think Treasury should always have its own identity through that strategic level. You might argue differently when it comes down to a lower operational level, where things can be very much governed, maybe to the earlier question or point that was raised about, process-driven SOPs, that sort of thing that may be picked up by outsourcers. I think there's possibly scope down that end, but I think in terms of, as a hypothetical Treasury perspective, you'd want to keep the controls and the synergies around that kind of operations within an identifiable team that's accountable and responsible for it. And that would be the strands of the Treasury GBS or COE. So I'd always advocate that it stays in as its own way, and it manages those processes and develops its own efficiencies along with the rest of the organisation.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mike. And Diana, anything to add on that? I know you've said quite
well, very little. As Mike was saying, the treasury knowledge or the treasury career, if you think about it, it's very narrow. Yet this is part of finance, and we have a wide finance understanding about what is happening into the business. But you need to have specialized skills so that you can advise on financial markets. Where are the interests going? What is the company doing to protect the investment, the cash, so on and so forth. Then it is a bit hard for that activity to be picked up by the shared service. And actually, if you think about it, because the treasury function is an advisory activity, it's less likely that the CFO is part of the GBS. Hence, probably it's less probable that the treasurer who should sit actually close to the CFO should sit in the GBS. So I think I do agree with you guys.
That's really useful. And actually, one thing I would add on that, and a bit of a plug for the ACT runs some research every year that's called the Business of Treasury. It's a really good piece of research, and I'd urge people to have a look at that. And one of the things that we've found over time is that the Treasury teams and treasurers are becoming more integrated into almost all of the business aspects of it. And there is a need for, if you're going to have that, there's that real need for being close quite physically to have those discussions as well. And we're just seeing that integration of treasury teams much less of in a wider sense as a back office function and more an integral aspect of business operations as well. So yeah, really just to add to your views on that, that's what we've looked at. We've got the last 5 minutes and a question that I was going to ask here, and someone else has asked it as well, so thank you very much for that. If we're looking at how we change, how things are changing and potential for working remotely and things like that, one of the things we looked in both pieces of research that we did, one of the things that treasury operations within shared service centres and global business centres struggled with is the recruitment of staff and the retention of staff. You know, generally where the locations are, it's a hugely mobile workforce, and there's opportunities for everyone to move on that. The question is with all this move away from need for physical location, does this mean you've now got a borderless talent pool to draw from? So does this solve some of your problems in this area? Not specifically you, but you know, is this something we can utilize working forward to making sure that we've got people who've got the right skills that we need to work within treasury operations within this area? And I think I'm going to start, sorry, on this one, Diana, if I can start with you and your thoughts on that, because I know we've worked together on this quite a bit before.
Yes, sure. I would say that depending on the skill required for the activity that you are about to do in treasury, the need of a physical location not longer being there on some of the aspects might come in hand. However, you might still have a treasury organization which requires some operation to be integrated within, and if it is so, then not having again a physical location, and if you are to hire a junior, training that person would be harder. We have been through that, and it is becoming a bit of a pain. But it all goes back to the maturity, to the role profile that you are applying to. Because again, if you are talking about really senior people, the fact that we do not require a physical presence, or in the future we will not require a physical presence, might be easier. But if you are talking about a junior person, hence going back to the GBS fact that they focus on less value-adding activity, more repetitive task, and then the junior staff is more to be located in the GBS part. I think it would be a bit of it would be slightly difficult.
Okay, thanks for that. And David, do you look forward to scanning the world for treasury talent that you'll be able to use no matter where they are?
Well, I think one of the big things about a shared service centre is the identity and possibly sort of the branding of it. And I think the people I've spoken to in our teams like the ability to sort of feel part of a team, feel part of a family, as part of the shared service centre family, providing services to the other parts of the business. And yes, they'd have certain skill sets, etc., but they definitely have an identity. And I think that identity would be lost if they were more globally spread out. And I think, therefore, you know, to have them all in one area with the skill sets, with the languages which these teams have, which is phenomenal. I mean, I feel so bad that, you know, I'm not a language speaker like these guys are, and phenomenal. But, you know, so I think they yearn for that, and therefore to actually put them on a sort of more global basis and have them working remotely, they would lose something. And I think people like an identity, and therefore that enables them to sort of, as Diana said, along the teaching, the training, and feeling part of it, provide a better service all in all to everyone, to their customers, which is us ultimately.
Thanks, David. And finally, Mike.
Yeah, pretty much the same. You know, with that sort of fulcrum, that sort of physical location, the hub, if you like, of activity that we have in Bratislava and other places, I think that has its place. It really is quite a great way of getting things together. But it's not the only community within there, because it's a wider finance community as well. And in terms of, you know, the recruitment and development, we would want to draw from those pools inwards and outwards of treasury, so to the other areas of finance and things like that. So I think we'd always want that kind of you know, that mobility within our own organization to help fulfill some of the recruitment areas. It's interesting, you know, thinking that, you know, and I think along the lines we're all thinking here is that if you taking it down the grade scales and those where it is a process driven opportunity, then those are the ones probably more in the physical locations. And then if you're looking at more of a regional or managerial type role, then that can be virtual across and over the top. But I certainly think that core element of where the shared service support really would, you know, is best served by physical location and interaction within those areas that we've got at the minute, the buildings we have at the minute, if you like.
Perfect. Thank you so much. David, I know you're going to interject there, but unfortunately, I could carry on with this all day. It's been such a fantastic panel, but I'm afraid we've run out of time. Thank you all for your questions. Sorry I couldn't get all to them, but they all came in the second half, so I was trying to get through as many of them as I can. I'd like to finish off by thanking the panel. It's been a fantastic discussion. So thank you, Mike, thank you, Diana, and thank you, David. Can I just remind delegates to fill in your feedback surveys on the session? That's really very useful for us. Continue your discussions in the virtual discussion forum, and it might be where we all slide off to afterwards on that. And don't forget, if you miss any of the sessions today, they're all being recorded, and you can join them. You can look at them later as well. So just once again, thank you so much to Mike, Diana, and David, and I hope everyone has found this a really useful session. And if you need any more support on that, then the ACT will be very happy to help. Thanks very much. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.